Welcome to CGI Voices, where CGI's experts share insights on the latest in federal government management, policy, and technology. I'm your host, Pete Tseronis. The United States government spends approximately $100 billion on IT support and services annually. Additionally, the U.S. government is challenged every year to manage IT support, acquisitions, and operations. The Government Accountability Office has this on its high-risk list, and it's been there for a bit. Today, we're going to talk about Agile with our esteemed guests at CGI, Teri Musick and Heath Rasnake. Teri is the director of the Emerging Technology Practice here at CGI and a strategic advisor for Federal Agile Center of Excellence activities. And Heath is the director for the Agile Center of Excellence. It's great to see you both.
Nice to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're going to have some fun, and we're going to talk about Agile. We're going to deconstruct it a bit. We're going to demystify it a bit. And let me just open with the question, which is, why is Agile important to the U.S. government? Teri, let's start with you.
Sure. Thank you. Well, I just want to keep back on what you said about high risk. Obviously, anytime you're working with technology and you're creating new things that haven't necessarily been created before, you run into a certain level of risk. Agile is a way to kind of reduce that risk and be more efficient from a cost perspective in delivering Agile software solutions to the federal government. And you mentioned the GAO. So there's quite a bit within that 300 and some page checklist that kind of dives into the recommended approaches for doing Agile within the federal government. And that's one of the things that we kind of are really excited about. We did help contribute to that GAO, Chapter 6 and 7 specifically, around procurement, acquisitions, program governance, earned value management, and that sort of thing. So the key is really to save taxpayer dollars, reduce that risk, and provide cost efficiencies where we can.
Let me, for our audience, just reference that GAO report, which was just updated and re-released, if you will, on December 15th of 2023. It's GAO-24-105506, titled the GAO Agile Assessment Guide. And to Teri's point, it's a good read, 300 some pages, if I recall. With that, let's Heath, why don't you riff off some of what we discussed in terms of that Agile in government?
Absolutely.
What's your take?
Well, I think it really gets back to the state of Agile, where we're at, where we're going, what the government needs. And it really ties back to the beginning of Agile 20 years ago, back when they were originating the frameworks, when they were talking about the principles and the manifesto that it's built upon. And the first of those principles was client centricity, building around the needs of the client and how important it is. And the government sees that if we focus those areas, especially in Agile ways of working, whether that's software or back office support, IT, hardware, human resources, hiring, whatever it happens to be, there's Agile ways of working that can focus in on the actual needs of the client and the customer, in this case, the U.S. government.
Let's dive a little deeper into that government question. And for both of you, is what it is something that's been around. And it's not just something you buy off a shelf. And with so much technology insertion and human capital and the dependence on technology and those tools and services each and every day of the week, how would you characterize the adoption of Agile in government and the agencies? Teri.
It's growing. There's different levels of maturity throughout different agencies, obviously. Some agencies were more early adopters than others. We have a lot of our defense agencies that are really mature in Agile. And the key to really thinking about Agile in the federal government is not to try to lump any particular agency or even any department from an agency into a one-size-fits-all type way of working, as Heath was talking about. We need to really understand the agency's missions, their objectives, and help find ways of working that are going to be conducive in enabling those mission objectives and those outcomes. And that's where Agile comes in, as we have the ability to pick and choose which best methodologies and approaches and frameworks are out there in the industry that are going to meet that agency's unique ecosystem, their unique challenges, and their unique mission objectives.
There's a lot to coalesce. You come in, you sit down. Being a former federal employee, I used to love when my partner's industry would come in and really get to know the mission. And I think that's sometime missed in this Agile adoption. It's one mission is not the same at each agency or within an agency. You talked about some of the different agencies. The IT shop may have a need for Agile that might be different than a CFO. Heath, what are your thoughts?
I think Teri really hit the nail on the head. Many times inside the same agency, there may be needs that are varying just across the same portfolio, where one side of the agency may have a very specific set of needs, and the other side of that agency has a completely different set of needs. And we have to be able to focus on what they really need in order to help them. And that goes back to the maturing part of this, where it's not a one-size-fits-all. We have to find the size that fits them so we can better serve them.
And one of the ways that we do that is we have several assessments that we kind of like to tie into as a means of discovery and due diligence. So we like to really, like you said, go in and partner and work with our agencies before we even come up with a recommended approach or a recommended solution to the Agile ways of working. And we gather that knowledge, and based on many different other Agile delivery engagements and some lessons learned, we're able to pick and choose which ways of working, which frameworks, whether it be Scrum or Kanban or Scaled Agile or PMI, Disciplined Agile, what's going to work best for the agency, what's going to work best to meet their challenges and needs. And of course, some agencies have their own requirements, and we need to find a way to assimilate within their own operating model and their requirements also.
So you mentioned a number, and there's sometimes the buzzword, the acronym, so feel free to...
Sorry.
No, I loved it. Scrum, Extreme Programming, Kanban. I thought it was Kanban, but forgive me if I'm saying it improperly. Those are great words for our audience to look up, but there's a lot to take in. And again, I keep coming back to the demystifying of challenges and opportunities. So if maybe we can pivot to, and let's kind of break this down. I mean, from a technology and IT perspective, IT agencies, heck, I remember I got certified in Agile, and I just remember I had all these wonderfully smart contractors and partners that kind of implemented. I just kind of knew the terms. But for me, it was for the IT organization. And then there's acquisitions in government, the CFOs, the chief fill in the blank. What are some of the challenges, though, when it comes to acquisition that you can illustrate or talk to?
Want me to go with that one?
I'll let you take
Okay.
that one.
All right, ladies first. Teri,
So,
it's all yours.
Acquisition is a really tricky area. Of course, we have the FAR, or the Federal Acquisitions regulations that we have to follow. The good thing with the FAR is it is maturing and it is growing to allow more Agile ways or innovative contracting ways. But a lot of times we find ourselves shoehorned into a particular contract or a way of working that is very traditional, very old-fashioned project management that doesn't necessarily enable Agile ways of working well. So what we have to do when we're working with our agency partners is come up with creative ways to tie back those types of contracted requirements and use the Agile delivery metrics, Agile delivery methods and practices as a way of reporting and determining our health. And we've actually got this really cool crosswalk, you say, on how to use Agile delivery metrics and define them back to a traditional product work statements from PMI, and use your Agile delivery metrics as a means of doing earned value management and project governance and get true project health in an Agile project. So the acquisitions area is maturing, but you still have to make sure that you're contracting the process and not necessarily a set of requirements, which is new. It's new to federal government. We're all learning how to do that.
So that's bringing in the acquisition community and the government.
Yes.
A lot of discussion as well. It's an IT thing, and I'm more of the East-West, where CFOs, as I mentioned, chief data officers, chief AI officers now, chief acquisition and procurement, everybody has to understand the role that IT can play in process. People, process, and technology, the enterprise architecture mantra, as I always and still continue to this day believe in, it has to be, for the most part, in balance. So
Yes, balance is the key.
Yeah. So acquisition, your views on that, Heath?
I think that as we see the maturity raising in Agile across the federal government, we're starting to see them understand more of what they need. And we're seeing contracts that are written that take into account many of the needs that traditionally were left out, or we're trying to shoehorn an Agile way of working into an existing matrixed workflow from 20 or 30 years ago, where now we're starting to see the inclusion of Agile terminology in the contracts. We're starting to see stipulations that they have to be there. I mean, I know there's a lot of incentives that the GSA offers for programs that are willing to work in an agile way, and it's,
Defense also.
Yeah.
Something that's really unique too, when it comes not just to acquisitions but delivery as well, is Agile was traditionally developed in the private sector. So you see a lot of the practices really focused on an IT department in the private sector in a larger company working with the business to do whatever they did in that particular private company. That doesn't necessarily always work well in the federal government because A, of course, it's not a business, and B, you're not necessarily working in that dynamic. A lot of the time it's federal contractors working with federal agency members to work on completing a common mission, goal, or objective. So we have to be a little creative with how we implement Agile. According to the 18F guideline, the product owner really needs to be a government person that owns that particular product. But according to Agile, the product owner needs to be within the Agile team itself. And that person has their own job to do, so that doesn't necessarily work well with the product owner traditionally in Scrum or in Agile, where you have the person writing the requirements, working with the team, prioritizing the backlog. So we've had to put like a proxy product owner or a team product owner that directly liaisons with the government 18F product owner, or the product management group does that to be able to do those requirements. And you don't see that in the private sector. That's just something that unique to federal government.
Let's talk about that culture component. Love both of your comments. We talked about missions are different from agency to agency. Deploying Agile in some manner, you can take all the training you want in the world, but that immersion of, and you just articulated and illustrated that, is there's a lot of people in the mix. And, there's the federal system owner, the person with a .gov who is, I'm the project lead, but I've got all these people supporting me. What do you see in terms of best practice and what's challenging when it comes to that culture issue of immersion of Agile?
I'm glad you decided to talk on people and culture. We're getting ready to kind of launch something that we're really excited about. It's called Agile Catalyst, and it's based on people and culture, being able to understand the culture, the people, the dynamic, and the ways of working. And it's basically a set of tools and frameworks that we've compiled over decades of working with our federal government agencies to successfully deliver Agile projects. And a couple lessons learned too, joint lessons learned. And we've put this together in kind of like a decision tree type format. So where we can come in, understand the agency, understand how they're working, understand what their challenges are, and it's going to accelerate, the ramp up to the ways of working. If we're going to do a transformation, it's going to accelerate the ability to get from point A to point B and go in and start working on meeting those mission objectives, or it's going to allow us to better assimilate within the government's ways of working if we're working in an agency that's already mature and already has their own digital playbook. One thing that's really cool is Agile metrics, because the big thing about federal governments is reporting back on the money you spend. We've got to find ways to save money. It's not our money, it's the taxpayers' money. So how do you really take a look at project health and determine how you're working, what value are you providing? And we've put together this tool called the Agile Metrics Framework that really dives into project governance in an Agile framework that ties back to those PMI type regulations. I'm going to toss it over to Heath here because this is his innovation here to talk a little bit about
steal some of the thunder
metrics
back,
that matter here.
Yeah. Agile metrics are a key, vital piece of it. We hear talk about OKRs, or objective key results, KPIs, key process indicators, and how important they are. But really, what it comes down to is measuring the right things. Because if we're measuring something that really doesn't bring value to the client, doesn't bring value to the customer, doesn't bring value to the team, then we're measuring these things and we're holding a standard that really doesn't have value. We have to find what they need measured. If they have a pain point here, let's build a metric around the need that they have, what they're actually seeing. How can we adjust it?
That's a customization component. Just keep going. No, because I'm sensing that it's not, here's our playbook, thou shalt follow this way. It's, hey, let's understand that unique mission and some of those pain points, but keep going.
Yes. So we have to work with our agencies, with our partners in this to make sure that we're measuring the right things, and that even when we're measuring, we also have to be careful not to just measure in one direction where we measure only this certain thing and all of a sudden we start leaning in that direction and we may improve that metric and then we're suffering over on this other side. So not only do we have to have metrics that actually matter and that are measuring the correct things, we also have to make sure that we're measuring alternative metrics on that as well, so we're not leaning too far in one direction or the other. We have to balance ourselves.
It's mainly for our internal folks to help drive that dialogue and that collaboration with our agencies to help them come up with their best way of working. It's not like something that we're going to sell and say, here, now you have to pay for this. This is just what we do as part of our consulting services.
We realize that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution in Agile, but if we can work with our clients, work with our agencies that we work with, we can find the right size that fits them.
Bingo.
Are these practices that evolve or develop as a result of the work here, at CGI, or, again, I wanted to kind of dive a little bit into the Center of Excellence, where it is today and where it's going, how it's evolving. But in terms of when you go into an agency and you learn about some of those opportunities to improve processes, is that baked back into the Agile Catalyst framework?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The Center of Excellence as well. So we actually started the Agile Center of Excellence at CGI in 2018 within CGI Federal. Our commercial global company has had a Center of Excellence for a little bit longer. But when you take a look at the metrics and what you're going to be measuring, we did start out doing that traditional, this is what this particular framework says that you measure. This is what you have to track. And we found that it's sometimes easy to gain metrics. I'll be honest, it's easy to gain metrics. I can make statistics say whatever they need to say, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're measuring the right things. We focus on continuous improvement and continuous innovation.
And transparency.
And transparency, where the entire program is. Everybody knows what everybody's working on. We set a goal and objective. We work with the agency to set a goal and objective. We measure that growth. We determine what the KPI is for baseline, and then we measure going forward. So that way we know if the processes that we've put in place are actually effective and we need to continue doing that, or if we have to pivot and try something else. So the metrics are a means of experimenting and learning and growing.
So federal agencies have a lot to consider. Not 1-800 dial Agile and you'll get somebody. A lot of it has to do with that culture that we discussed today, but let's specifically think about it from that federal side of the fence. What should federal leaders consider when initiating and deploying Agile?
So I think the first thing is to figure out where they're at currently. It's kind of like a GPS. There's 2 points of data that kind of dictate where you're going. You know your destination. You want to be more agile, but where are you now? So you have to kind of start where you're at, and based on assessments or based on conversations, that's really what it ties down to, is the things that we communicate back and forth. It's all about the communication and working together to find where you're at and where you're going, and building a roadmap, a transformation roadmap of how to get from point A to point B, or maybe to point Z. It doesn't matter how far it is, but you have to start where you're at and then build upon that.
And I think the key is journey is a word that I would like to apply here. The key is journey. Depending on where you are in the journey, you're going to consider different types of help in consulting as a leader. Do you need more training? Do you need more of that theoretical knowledge brought in? Do you need to bring your team up to speed on what Agile is and how to operate in an Agile framework? Or are you a little bit more mature and you just need somebody how to take that, help you learn how to take that theoretical knowledge and apply that to your agency or to your unique agency? So the key to being successful is really having that top-down leadership buy-in. This is the way that we are all going to work. This is the way that we're all going to work together. We are all aligned on the same vision and the same objectives. That's key. If you have folks that are not sure what the vision is, not sure what the goals are, not sure where we're headed on our journey or even where the bullseye is, then you're not going to be as successful. So that top-down leadership driving the overall program, whether it's change or whether it's just implementing a new software or a new product or just some type of mission objective, everybody aligned on that bullseye. And then transparency. Where are we on this journey? Where are we on getting this product to market, to our users? How are we going to meet our objectives and meet our American customers' needs by deploying this product? Are we working on the right things at the right time? And what else is it going to impact? Dependencies across other agencies. We have a lot of cross-agency dependencies. So that type of top-down leadership is key for success.
I'm hearing that discovery is a big part of day one or 2 months or 3 months, learning what that leadership and that culture is prepared for, maybe different maturity levels. But I think there's a lot of dialogue that might indicate if it's going to be successful, because I liked your from point A to point B, even though we understand in Agile it's not so sequential. It's just knowing, I loved it. Where are we today? Where do we want to go? And I would assume you help folks think about where they want to go,
it's
some
collaborative.
of the possibilities.
It's a collaboration. It's not us telling you, you telling them. It's really a collaborative journey together.
I like that. And that's that partnership of open government, partnership, participation, collaborative, transparency. I love it. I love it coming from my 25 years. It's great to partner with folks like yourselves. All right, so let's if we can, because I do like facts tell, stories sell. What is a use case or a situation where maybe, there was this challenge, but not only did we meet that challenge, but boy, it really opened up a lot of eyes and there was huge success.
Okay, this is one of my favorites. We started working with this organization in 2018. Probably about 6 months before the Agile Center of Excellence was actually formed. It was one of the reasons why we decided, hey, we need to come together and, have a unified strategy on Agile. And that's why we built the Agile Center of Excellence, so we could have a unified approach to helping our federal government agencies. But this particular agency wanted to be more efficient with their releases. All they kept saying is, we want to release to production faster. We want to get this to the users faster. And it wasn't a case of them coming to us and saying, oh, we want to be Agile, or we want to do this new cool thing called Agile. It was, hey, we got this problem. I need you to solve it. So in that collaboration, in that discussion, I was actually on the account team at the time. We came up with an approach, a way of working by incorporating DevOps and then eventually DevSecOps in an Agile way of working. We started with a Scrum small pilot, and we worked with a small pilot team. And at first the agency was like, no, we don't want to get on the Agile bandwagon. We want you to tell us how to do, in our current process, deliver faster. So we said, give us 6 months. We'll pilot it. We'll let you know. We'll show you what the results are. We'll work on this together. If it fails, it fails. We'll try something else. And they were willing to work with us. Well, within 6 months, we had an increase of probably about 3% in our releases to market. And then we ended up taking that pilot and spreading that across the program to other Agile teams and what we would call a scaling model. And we scaled Agile across 5 teams to begin with, and then we ended up, by the 2-year point was over with, it was 7 teams. And over that course of 2 years, their problem, which was getting releases to market, went from 4 quarterly releases to over 200 releases every year. So we were pushing to production every time we had something new to get out there. We were using dark launches, we were using feature flags, we were getting it in front of the customer, we brought the customer in and the user community into testing before we would push it out and say, look, this is what we're doing. We would make sure it was going to be conducive and work and meet the needs, and then we would push it out. We had fast rollbacks, so we could pull back if we, made any issues into the production environment. And it was over a 200% increase in deployments to production.
My word to that is exponential, like exponential success. I love it. Scaling and exponential awesomeness. Heath, top that one. Or meet that one.
Well, I just add to that one, I think would probably be the best. And we do things like that, DevSecOps. We have the opportunity to start decoupling things that have been coupled for
years.
Decades. We'll say decades. Where, if a deployment meant there was a release. And now, through DevSecOps and practices like that, we're able to decouple that release from the deploy, where the code may be deployed, but it may not be launched to the end user and the customer until they actually need it. And that really negates some of the things of, those midnight runs where you're launching code and everybody's feverishly testing because it goes live at, this X amount of
8
time.
a.m. in the morning.
And now, we have the ability to deploy that code, test it over time, make sure it's right, make sure it's working, make sure it meets the needs of the client. And then when it's time to actually turn that feature on for our end user, it's as easy as flipping a switch. We know it's tested, we know it's ready, we know it's deliverable, we know it's demonstrating value, and it's seamless.
Well, that to me is that summation of it. It is a journey. Everyone involved. If people buy into it and don't look at it as a quick fix, it can have this, as I said earlier, kind of an exponential impact on process improvement. So I appreciate all of that. So thank you for sharing those. Heath, what's something you want to leave?
Sure. I'd like to say, I guess, that Agile in general and Agile in government especially isn't looking for another Agile leader. It's looking for people that know they're there to serve the team, serve the client. And leadership is the byproduct of that. Just like we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. It's the same thing. When we focus on serving our clients, serving the agencies, the leadership happens. It's just the byproduct of it.
Wonderful. Teri.
I'd like to say once we move past thinking of Agile in terms of methodologies and frameworks and prescriptive processes, we can really begin to gain efficiencies. We can really start adapting to change and begin to embrace agility and drive mission success for our federal agencies.
You can find CGI Voices on your preferred podcast platform or watch the video version on YouTube. Subscribe or follow and spread the word to your colleagues. CGI Voices, expert insights for federal decision makers.